we are going to address a critical issue for the future regarding green and blue economies and how we're going to begin to develop an educational process that will meet the needs of students and, shall I say, of all ages in the future. So I'd like the panelists to please do a self-introduction, starting with Elliot.
Oh.
It's okay.
Oh, okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Elliot Washor. I'm co-founder of Big Picture Learning, and we've been doing this work now for almost 30 years. July will be 30 years, but my partner and I have been doing this work since 1971 for 54 years, around starting with the interests of each and every young person and developing a curriculum around that, K to 16. We have our own college as well in a number of places. So we have a number of schools in LA, but we have about 200 schools in the United States and double that number around the world.
Wow.
And we have an interesting way of doing things that starts with the interest of those young people, where they find meaning in their life. 2 days a week our students are out of school with
Don't
interns.
give it all
No,
away.
no, just give a little bit. I know how much further you want me to go.
No,
oh, that was it.
don't
all right,
give
I'm
it
going to
away.
stop now. You're in
Don't give it
suspense.
away.
What can I tell you?
Yeah.
I'm Robin Kramer. I'm the managing director of the Smidt Foundation, not Schmidt, not the Google guy. Eric Smidt is the co-founder and owner of a family business called Harbor Freight Tools, which is the source of our wealth for our foundation and our work. And I'm here because one of the first things we ever did was to try and create a funder strategy to support the increase of understanding, support, and greater investment in skilled trades in public high schools and for high school students. This began around 2015, and we're very lonely. Like, where is everyone? Who cares about this? What's the deal between good jobs that our country needs, that communities need, jobs are not going abroad, and the fact that so many of these pathways with admittedly a freighted history don't exist anymore, and young people don't have agency and choice. And I will just say it's a pleasure to be with many horizon thinkers, including this guy, who was one of our very first and most significant grantees.
Oh, thank you. And Garrett.
Hi, everyone. My name's Garrett Rapsilber. I'm a director with HR&A Advisors. For those who aren't aware, HR&A is a national consulting firm focused really broadly about the long-term development of our communities through many different lenses, whether it be around questions of affordable housing, thinking through access to broadband, to thinking of topics around workforce and economic development. And so today, one of the hat that I'm wearing is really around as being one of our climate leads on the West Coast, and thinking about the climate transition, thinking how that can be most just, and really creating opportunities that can be accessible to the broadest of, in this case, in LA County, the broadest population as possible. And so part of this work, and I see Judith Taylor is a partner in HR&A, is also in the audience. We've been working for many years with the LA Clean Tech Incubator, precisely thinking around the evolution of workforce development to meet the moment.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so, well, really excited to talk more about that later.
Good. We want to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, Simon.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Simon Bluestone, and I serve as a growth leader for Stantec in the Western U.S. and very much focused on our key clients and everything we deliver from Stantec in Greater Los Angeles and Southern California. Stantec is a global leader in sustainable architecture, engineering, and environmental consulting, and we like to say we innovate at that intersection of community and creativity and client relationships, really to try to redefine what's possible. Something, the urgencies of today really require. The nexus around workforce development, from my perspective and for Stantec, we are deeply tied to our communities, and we often partner. There's 4 different ways that we really are engaged in workforce development. Some are external, and some are internal in the professional services business. And I look forward to sharing more on that as we progress.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, David, in addition to the group.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ms. Lowenthal. My name's David Bella, and I'm a trustee for the Los Angeles Community College District. It's the largest in the country. We have 9 colleges that span 75% of the county. And we have one of the largest construction bond programs, over $13 billion. And we do have a 2040 sustainability goal that's really ambitious. And right now, I'm chairing the first ever ad hoc committee on workforce development for the district, made up of trustees that are going to be able to put our students at the forefront of some of the workforce development needs of, not only LA County, but also the state and the country. So we're really excited about being able to be here and discuss this with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe we should start out by asking each of you, what do you think the skills are that are needed for the blue and green economies of the future? Anybody can answer. We don't need to go down the road. Don't all answer at once.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, I can jump in because, in our business, we're kind of STEM focused in many regards, but there's definitely a social science perspective to the urban planning, and I know, Garrett, it dovetails a lot with what you do. Having skills, obviously, that in the professional arena, the architects, the engineers, the technologists, if you will. I work with a lot of scientists, right? Social, whether it's the ecosystems teams, the biologists, the archaeologists, the cultural resources folks, atmospheric scientists. There's a whole pipeline that's needed for the blue and green economy. I'm looking at and we're tied and connected with the trades too, right? I mean, what our clients are creating assets. Our purpose is really to build resilience into the communities and partnering with our clients, whether they're investor-owned utilities, public utilities, the ports. We need to have talent that can both design and build those solutions in our communities, right?
Okay, that's great. Anybody else?
I'll talk a little bit about kind of via some legislative bills that we're sponsoring in Sacramento, which are preparing us to put together all the nuts and bolts for our students to enter the green and blue job economy. But one of them is a workforce bill, AB 47, being carried right now by Mike Fong, former trustee, that's going to allow us to use these workforce development funds and actually diversify the criteria. So right now we're doing it for pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeship programs with the trades, but now we want to put some language in that would allow for workforce development money to hit internships. So this is unprecedented. Again, this money usually is used for the trades. But what it's going to do is that every single person in here, including all of you, including the port, will now be able to take one of our students and we'll pay for it through the workforce development money so that you could get not only a free intern, but you're going to get to have someone that could be ready to hit the job market. One of the things we're noticing is that the green economy is hitting every sector. So even from like cybersecurity to maintaining, a low carbon footprint. I mean, it goes on and on and on. When you obviously look at the building program that we have and that the port has and everyone else, all of the jobs are also being tailored into making sure that they take sustainability into account. So that's one thing. And then we opened the first ever, it's actually state chartered climate center at West LA College, which some of you should have seen out there in the news. But what that's doing is literally having the academic senate at LACCD and throughout the state really work with industry to create curriculum and then certificates and so on and so forth that again will fit the needs of green and blue jobs. So there's just two examples, and there's a lot more, but yeah.
Thank you. Did someone else want to respond, Garrett? Go.
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about the work that we're wrapping up with Lacey right now. So we've been working with Lacey on a LA Green Jobs workforce partnership. And really the goal was to bring together both public, private, nonprofit, get everybody into the room and talk about specifically what are the workforce needs and what needs to change. And we ended up selecting electric transportation as sort of the first topic in this partnership. And one of the conversations that came up was around skill sets. And so there's skill sets that are, very technical. Like we need to know things like lockout, tagout. We need to have our OSHA certifications, things like that. And there's a real need to just have a standard baseline set of training, for instance, for charging ports, which just doesn't exist right now. But I think the thing that was more interesting is there's a broad base of skills that are just universally applicable and maybe things that we don't initially think about, but things like computer literacy, things around customer service and just communication skills, the critical thinking and problem solving skills. This technology is moving so quickly that we can't just be sitting in a classroom and expect to have all the answers. We need to be able to learn on the job. And so really that ability, having that hands-on experience and getting that real-world application is just something that's so critical here. And I think critical for the workforce, and also thinking, I will stop here, but thinking also about who has access to these jobs and the fact that we just see such broad inequities in who has access, and we can't assume that everyone has just skills, those soft skills that we just assume are just universal.
Thank
So,
you.
could I just say something really quick,
Yeah,
which I learned
please.
from this guy, so I'll be quick.
Yes.
So,
Not quick.
they're not soft skills, they're life skills,
Yeah.
they're show up
Right.
to work skills, and they're relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say and maybe this is a helpful metaphor, because we always try and jump to the systems, how to make the systems work. The way we think about our work is if you take a couch that has 2 pillows. One couch pillow is the K-12 system. It's politics, it's priorities, it's funding mechanisms and what's valued. And off that couch pillow, trades is falling in the crack. The other big system is the workforce development so-called system with its many colors of money and braided funding and all that requirement. And its priorities, its siloed nature, all of that. And in that couch pillow, high school's falling in the crack. So what I have to say is that the skills that are needed are also needed by employers and by these systems. But without relationships for young people in particular to be able to access and learn, the skills they need are learning, they want to learn. They have zeal.
Which relationship?
Relationships with people in the community with whom they can speak and learn from over time. And systems are not very well built to help all those folks at every age, quote, succeed and advance.
Thank you, Robin. I think Elliot's been chomping at the bit here.
Well, I'll add to that because that's part of a relation. You learn through relationships, and we've forgotten that in our schools, in our youth development organizations, and those relationships happen in a situated learning environment outside, not just in schools. Schools text-based, certifications, what? If you talk to industry and you talk to schools, the schools are teaching these skills, and you ask industry what the skills are, they don't know. All right? But who knows are the people on the job. If young people meet those people on the job, develop relationships, they learn what is known as the tricks of the trade. And you only get that through something called privileged information, which AI cannot do. It's transmitted through people. You don't do it that way. I don't give a damn what the book says. Here's how to do it. All right? And unless you get young people connected to adults out in the field, and we do it with Harbor Freight Fellows, where we pay the students a stipend, pay the mentors, pay the people in youth development or schools a little bit amount of money. Most of the time the mentors give it back to the young people because they finally found somebody who loves what they do, and all of a sudden that magic happens with the relationship. So the skills are built through the relationship. Students are interested in blue and green technologies. They don't know where to go. All right? And when schools Start with the interests of students and don't say, that's all right, but we got to do algebra now. We're missing the boat. And we have to provide the time, both in youth development and in schools, to get students out. Teachers are paid to keep kids in. Youth development is paid to keep kids indoors. They got to be out, and it can't be text-based. That's where you're going to learn those skills. So I'll give you one anecdote. And my buddy Frank Wilson, who's a neurologist, was called into Boeing years ago because Boeing had a problem with their engineers. They didn't know how to put things together. Frank's question for him was, ask the students at that time, have you ever worked on a family car? These folks have never felt torque. They've been on computers their whole lives. Now we're on the phones, and all of a sudden, they get the engineers that they want. I'll give you one more thing. In Ireland right now, and this goes to the skilled trades, we got it almost opposite. When you're a skills trades person in Ireland and a journeyman, they have a pathway from that into a 4-year degree in engineering. Now you've felt the world and you know something. You actually really know. That's different. So when you get those skills as a skilled tradesperson, it's that important to know. Metal, wood, textile, all those clay, all those things that you can feel the world, hot, cold, whatever. So these are really important pieces to look at how we do what we do. Not in workforce, but in the development of each and every young person to give their life meaning. So that's real different.
It sounds like the old expression, it ain't what you know, it's who you know.
Exactly, and we use that a lot, because I come from Rhode Island, it's the I know a guy state, you know. You got a problem, I know
Or
a
a
guy.
gal.
But not in that sense, not knowing. But really, schools don't focus on who you know, they give the what without the who. And if I ask every one of you in this room, how'd you get your work?
Yeah.
It's gonna be a who.
That's right,
Yep.
that's right. So, yes,
I have an
Simon.
example, Bonnie, just playing on Elliot's description there. So something within our Stantec organization, we do a lot of partnership with our community and our clients. And in going back to 2003, we proactively started a program with the City of Los Angeles, with the Board of Public Works, to go into specific council districts, where there are disadvantaged youth in high school, who we reached in and found out who the kids were who had some STEM interest, right? And again, a lot of our staff were really passionate about making a difference out there, and we connected, we created this mentorship program. Again, that connection between people actually in the business, to show these kids the art of the possible, like what could become if they pursued this path. From there, we built a cohort and worked with Public Works and ended up putting together a summer internship program where if the kids expressed interest, right, we would then work with them, and we set up a day in City Hall in Chambers with mock interviews, helped them write resumes, put them through this day of interviews. They all got the job, right? But it was, and council members came out. I mean, it was a big deal. That was, they got to see this piece of civic engagement, and then, we'd work with them for 6 weeks in a paid internship. They'd come and we'd have them kind of get a good rotation through what we do to see what happens if they pursue this. And then we'd help them on their college applications, right? And help with that next step, and then keep in touch. And we built these mentors through college, and seeing them come out of college and feeding our pipeline for talent too, right? And creating a win within the council district, right? With the community, and that was something that made a difference. That's now morphed into a few different programs. There's a summer introduction to engineering and science internship the city does. The intern project is a summer program that the city of LA does. So similar context from the private sector into the community.
That's awesome. So any of you could mention some of the alternative pathways to college, and you don't just automatically get there because you have a high school degree. What are those alternative pathways? Anybody can.
So I was just gonna kind of, pony off of what he's talking about. Right now we're noticing at the community colleges that, in general, males are not enrolling. That's something that we're ignoring, we're not paying a lot of attention to, but our numbers are showing a 60-40, which should be alarming because the population is 50-50. You're also looking at, even though we're in California, we're in Los Angeles, we're not immune to rhetoric. And so a lot of, in particular, males are listening to, don't go to college, don't worry, go make money in another way. So I think we really have to be, hold a mirror to ourselves and basically understand that, as, LA County, we really have to continue to promote STEM and to really go into the schools. We're going in as early as 8th grade for our dual enrollment programs. I know some people and some parents are kind of sometimes a little bit scared of it, but I can tell you that it's happening in the affluent areas where students are taking college courses. So, at the end of the day, whether it's Long Beach City College, whether it's LACCD, we have to continue to engage our students at an earlier age. The second population is we got to bring in people who have been, essentially lied to about the green economy, about the blue economy, that, the jobs that they're leaving, they can enter these green jobs easily. They can actually go get the training, and even in a later age, if you re-enter, and ensure that people understand some of these jobs that in a particular training, 2-year certificates. The other thing we're doing is and I keep talking about the state legislature, but we're lobbying the state legislature and the academic senate to stop putting barriers. And I hate to say it, but like a 4-year degree is not necessary for every single green job out there. We have to be realistic about it. And in Pennsylvania, they've already started a program where state jobs will now require 2-year associates instead of a bachelor. I worked for the county for 10 years, and you don't need a 4-year degree at Parks and Rec to hand out some of the PE equipment. I'm aging myself, but anyway, my point is that we have to start being really innovative and continuing to push these type of jobs onto the population and to the student population.
Thank you. Garrett, were you going to say something?
Yeah. I was just going to say that, keeping my lens on electric vehicles and the charging network, and so we need people who can maintain the charging network that we're building out, and 95% of the time those issues are not electrical, and so it's really something like having an electrician sometimes is not necessarily, we don't necessarily need that in many cases. And so I like to think of it as almost like our healthcare system, where we had a lack of general physicians, and that primary care has been infilled with nurse practitioners. My mom being a nurse practitioner, I'm like very proud of that. And I think it's like something very similar. And so when you think of terms of training, there's a lot of 12-week training programs that have emerged that can really get someone up and running on just the basics, get you your safety certifications, your familiarity, some hands-on. A lot of times individuals maybe haven't even seen been in an electric vehicle before, dealt with a charger, and so it's creating those experiences to be in person, hands-on, and they don't necessarily need to be long. So I think these shorter certification programs, apprenticeships, how do people learn about them? Relationships. Something else that we've started to see from the DOE, NYSERDA, is creating these innovation in terms of just the platforms of talking about careers. And so what is like the career, for instance, there's a platform to look at career pathways based on level, based on the phase of development, from R&D to construction to maintenance and operations for offshore wind, for building electrification. And it really gives the user the ability to see, like, here's what an entry-level position is, what are the skills I need, where are those training programs, and then envision for themselves what that pathway might look like. It's not one linear pathway that everyone needs to follow here.
Robin?
Yeah, I brought a graphic just to show you. We have an expression that we learned in Coro, which is the map is not the territory, right? The map is not the territory. And this is a very beautiful example from an excellent organization called the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, born, I don't know, like 6 years ago, out of New America. And it really talks about, this is the ideal of how it might work for a student in high school to garner a youth apprenticeship and to go through this beautiful piece that would end with an entry-level job and then the opportunity to advance. So what's in the way? What's in the way? This is, and I don't like Beverly, I don't like to use the word Bonnie alternative. It's just a choice pathway. What's in the way is that something like 5% of all students in the United States are in some kind of internship, 5%. And of those, an even smaller percentage, and you could hear the theme here, are in an earn and learn program. They're not paid. And apprenticeships themselves are not just for young people. I believe the average age of an apprentice, a registered apprentice through the Department of Labor, is 30. So for all. So these are other pathways, and I think there's one other piece which we would call in LA, who you know, who's your family, who's your cousin. 94% of all of the businesses in LA County are small, 20 people or less. They don't have HR departments. They don't have, you know, coordinated pathway-like training programs. So people learn by doing. They learn by doing, but for many people, they can't afford to learn without an earn and learn kind of bulwark.
So one of the things I'll add to what Robin says is that, once again, we have it wrong, both in our system of youth development and in our schools. In order to get to an internship, it's a carrot and a stick mentality. What normally they do is you got to take all these courses, you got to sit in a seat, you got to get these grades, got to behave, and then all of a sudden they'll give you an internship in your senior year when you're about ready to make a decision that you don't know what you really want to do. The other way to do it is the way we do it, starting in the 9th grade and even earlier when we have kindergarten, all the way through, looking at the interests and choices of each and every student as they change, as the map shows, and as some people said. All of a sudden, you're looking at a program that says, we're going to let you out because you're not doing well. We got to engage you, and the way to engage you is you get you a person out in the world, a young person, not wait till the carrots are all eaten up, all right? And you're making sure that you don't have to use a stick. The reason why you're using a stick is because they're disengaged. The reason why they're disengaged is because their interests and choices are not being recognized and met. Once you get them out in the real world, and we have data around this, longitudinal studies where we followed our students 15 years out, 68 to 72% of our students graduating from our schools off to college or into career have work in the internships they had while they were in high school. Done by a third-party evaluator who's expert on longitudinal study. If you do it the other way, you never get there. If you go from the middle to the edge, you never get there. You have to do it the other way around. Start at the edge and resonate with the middle. So that's the change that needs to take place, or else we're going to end up in the same kind of situation we've always had. We keep kids locked up in school, in quotes.
Yeah. So some of you may remember, and I remember from school board days, that there was a push to get all students to take the A to G requirements for the University of California. And the feeling was that there was a group of students from less educated families who didn't know exactly how to do that. So there was that push, and it left out the relationships that you were talking about.
It's a college for all mentality that didn't consider the interests and choices of each and every young person, and sometimes families. And there was justification for that because there were some issues around what was happening to young people who weren't going to college and weren't given that opportunity. Right. At the same time, now people are saying, well, they all went to college, now they have unmanageable debt, and they still don't know what they want to do. All right, we prepare them for a place that doesn't prepare them for a place, as we would say. So these are issues where we stood our ground the whole way through that and focused on those choices, knowing it's a lifelong journey and you're trying to find meaning in your life. And once you use that as a measure, instead of just income or something else like that, all of a sudden things start changing. So the measures have to change as well.
I do want to just jump in really quickly and talk about CTE, which is, you know, why we did that as school board members. I was on Montebello School Board for 8 years, was because the uncertainty of job security. And so what you see the data show is that unless you have a real industry that's willing to take high school diplomas as a real serious entry point, then the first time that corporations and you want to downsize, you remove the workforce that doesn't have the college degree, even the 2-year degree, and you hire someone else at cheaper rates. The experience piece at the workforce world, I also worked for the county for 10 years under Supervisor Molina and oversaw the workforce development, the WIB. I saw that firsthand. So what we have to do in its place is create these pipelines directly. So what we're doing, for example, in our Build LACCD program, our main project program manager, construction management firm Jacobs, we asked them very nicely to create 50 internship spots for only our students in the world of construction management, public outreach, as well as communications. And what that did is that it created a safety, a job security pipeline in our own, build program. Now, to I think your point, those students are now working at Jacobs in the affiliated, companies that work in the bond program at all these different great jobs, and at the same time getting a 2-year degree with us, and or transferring to a 4-year, institution at the same time as having this internship. So I want to say that I think there's those two clear distinctions. In order for us to have some success, we do have to create some pipelines, and obviously here everyone's on the same page there. And I hate to say it, but from a board member perspective, you don't dictate it as much as you ask for help and you work together with industry to create some of these partnerships and programs.
Well,
Could
that
I-
was
Bonnie,
my,
could I just say something
Yes,
building on
please,
that?
please.
Because this is something that you all did at the Port of Long Beach, which is exemplary, which is you built into a 10-year project labor agreement, a pathway for young people to have, for your point, for a sustainable future. And in my mind, I'm not fully knowledgeable. I don't know of any other public entity that's in the infrastructure building business that has a project labor agreement, which also includes local hire and local training and makes the connect. And I think this is a promising pathway, very unusual. And you talk about the bonds that are available. What would it be like if those bonds, which are to build, also included the requirement alongside as a pathway in to build sustainably, already there, right? To train and create a viable pathway through unions, which these are public dollars that open the door for opportunity, starting with the job and kind of working backwards for young people who live here or wherever the bonds are being effectuated, to grow a life and wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. That is a true alternative that exists, as far as I know, only in Long Beach.
well, thank you for the credit to the Port of Long Beach.
Very good.
Let's hear it from the Port of Long Beach.
And Bonnie, I have like a quick figure which I think might tie into what David was saying, is that like these jobs of opportunity where you only need a high school degree, like it's not fictitious, this is real. Like in our green job study in 2021, we found that 40% of all green jobs were something you could consider a high road or green collar job. So you don't need to require a high school, you just require a high school degree.
Not just. It's a big deal to have a high school degree.
So requiring a high school degree or a GED, and then there's often some on-the-job training, and it's just that is just not the market. And in my opinion, there's just a lot of marketing issues when it comes to a lot of these green careers. And one, they're kind of ill-defined in many cases, and we don't necessarily. We have to let individuals see themselves in these careers. And so, for instance, women only represent like 2% of electricians or 2% of automotive technicians in LA County. When there have been, for instance, for chargers, if it had women in the name of it, they were able to get 50% of the group as women into the training classroom. And so it's just, I think there's another piece here. So like, do people see themselves in here? Do they see that there's something exciting for me and also something exciting to give back to my community?
Thank you. So
Yeah.
what more can companies and industries do? You talked about what a public agency is doing, but what can private companies do?
Well, I could give an example. This is a good story, which has the virtue of being true. About 6 years ago, 22 of the largest home builders in our country went to a dinner after their national conference. And I don't know who said it, but one of the guys said, we could keep complaining about the lack of skilled workforce for our industry, or we could do something about it. And they created an entity called the Building Talent Foundation, which is exemplary. Building Talent works with home builders all over the country. These are mostly suburban, multifamily builders. They come to, say, Austin. They know what they want to, they have their plans checked, they're ready to go. Where do they find local work? They call the local community college, maybe someone answers, maybe there's a pipeline, maybe not. They call the mayor's office, we're not sure. So Building Talent they created this sort of rolling intermediary that says to the builder, what do you really need? What are the entry-level skills, comportment, readiness? And what are you willing to pay to support their training? Then they go to the local training providers, some of them known, some of them unconventional, and they create a match, a pipeline, relationships, and stick with it. So that's an example of a big industry that, they had a pain point.
And the schools need to incorporate that.
Well, they work with the schools that do have this kind of training and that don't, right? They offer an opportunity.
So here's a little counter to that, because schools that are in the business of diploma granting as part of it, but they fill up the day with, an example, A through G courses that don't give youth enough time sometimes to get internships or to do anything else, which they may want to pursue some CTE work. So let me give you 2 or 3 examples of that, because youth development plays a role here as well. We have an industry connected. So one, we have a program called Habitat for Aviation. It's part of our Beyond Bound program, which Pam Roy over there is our seed funder for. That's in Vermont, largest producer of electric planes in the United States. We have a spot at the airport. The company funds us, Harbor Freight Fellows funds us to develop mechanics for electric planes and pilots for electric planes. That's thriving. And it's about getting young women into the field. That's one. 2, we have another program in South Carolina with Harbor Freight Fellows once again. Where you develop industry is not necessarily what you think that industry is there. So for example, we have a relationship, our second year going into our third year, with McLeod Hospital. They have their own infrastructure for the trades. They do all their work internally. We have Harbor Freight Fellows in there. A foundation called Power Ed also helps us. Those hospitals have electricians, plumbers, HVAC, you name it, all of them. And now we're in our third year. So that's another example of a partnership that you don't think of. The space is the space that you would normally go to. The third one is in Newark and Philadelphia, where we have a partnership with the Carpenters Union. And that's worked very well because it was really us behind the scenes, but everybody thinks it's theirs. So everybody is at the table. The mayor's office, industry, construction, unions, the Board of Education. And we built the program for Harbor Freight Fellows in Newark, with the superintendent going, you know what? I got all these other jobs besides teachers. I got culinary, I got HVAC, I got plumbing, I got carpenters. I'm gonna put our young people mentored by those folks. And if they finish, I'm gonna give them work. When they get their certification, go on to community college or go on to college and come back. So there's all these ways of doing it that are innovative and are producing results where we get people who normally wouldn't be in those fields, women and people of color, who have been sometimes left out of that work, which is high pay work, into those fields and staying in their community.
Got another example,
Yes.
Bonnie, from the private sector perspective. We do something through a program called the ACE Mentor Program. It's, architecture, consulting, and engineering, and it's an after-school high school program, again, where our staff volunteer and work with kids who have a passion for learning something. It's that experiential learning again, hands-on, and building that relationship, right, to reach in at the high school level to try to create a pipeline from there. We also work with a number of other professional societies, things like the Society for Professional Hispanic Engineers or American Society of Civil Engineering, and then, some of the nonprofits, LA Conservation Corps, right, reaching back into the community and partnering with some of our clients. We're doing some things, we're partnering with Southern California Edison, for example, where we are sharing, we create, sort of a green jobs landing page on their website, right, with a number of different public, private, nonprofit organizations, to try to drive that interest and insight into how, to plug in. So,
Let me ask you another question. What do you think the role of the policymakers would be? In our case, in Sacramento, let's forget about DC. Right. But what would the role be of policymakers to develop more incentives for education? In the broad sense of the word education as you've defined it.
Lower the age that students can do internships and apprenticeships. There's no reason why that can't be done. All right? Young people are working all the time outside of school, and it's our responsibility to think about that in some serious ways. That's one. Two, California used to have pay for driving tests. They don't anymore. First question, one of the first questions you get from an employer is, how you gonna get to work? In California, you gotta drive usually because the transportation system is not, public transportation system is not very good here. Unless you wanna spend all your money on Ubers and DoorDash, you're gonna be in trouble. So that driving test is a big deal. The third thing I'll say, and I'll stop, is that seat time requirement. In order to learn, they think that you only learn inside of school, and then you never learn outside of school. And that has got to change. That formal learning outside of school is counted, and there's a lot of talk about the elimination of what they call the Carnegie unit. So far, it hasn't happened. We've done a lot of work with that, where we credit our young people, whether they're learning in or outside of school. So I'll stop.
So there's experiential learning
Correct.
at universities or
Yes,
colleges.
Northeastern is
but
giving an
maybe
example.
not at the high school or middle school level.
And there's not that much at colleges either. The Northeastern has really good data on this, but they have a trimester program where they do that. It's called a cooperative education, I think. So they get good results about getting young people, getting their students after they graduate into the fields that they did their cooperative learning experiences in.
yeah.
Well, I will tell you that years ago at Cal State Long Beach, I taught a 2-unit course called EPIC, Educational Participation in Communities, something like that,
Yeah, no, it's scattershot, and it needs to be policy.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I do remember the students and how valuable that was for them to have that kind of experience as they did internships.
That's right.
Anyone else?
There is, I'll
Policy.
be quick, there's floating, the governor introduced something called the California Career Master Plan, and the aim is to create a pathway, not unlike the plan for higher education. And so I would say, keep your eye on it, and based on what you've heard here and what you already know, make comments to make it real. The plan is at a very high level. Some might say it advantages college over career, not that they are to be in opposition. So I would say take a look, because that, if it were to be put in place, would have implications for coordination pathways for many years in our state.
I'd like to also add that, after the fires, Sonia Christensen, who's a chancellor for the California Community Colleges, asked us to begin the curriculum for a more robust fire tech, kind of training at the LA colleges. And I have to tell you that legislators and policymakers really need to talk to each other and talk to industry, because I think one of the things that's missing is that real commitment to ensuring that we do have these green jobs and that our students are consistently changing with the times. You talk about climate change, when you don't have all legislators really looking at, or whatever you want to call it, catastrophe, whatever.
Yeah.
We have to stand together to, really ensure that all of the different barriers are removed. Having a conversation with the academic senate of the state of California for community colleges, even Cal States, they don't always think the same way as like policymakers. On nursing, I'm not that I rattled some cages on nursing, but like, for example, I was like, hey, we could offer the baccalaureate degree at our community colleges to help meet the nursing workforce gap, but they were scared of it, obviously, right? Cal State system. But my point is that as these legislative packages, each assembly member, there's 80 of them, 40 senators, as they move forward, we need to be there at their offices, everyone here, letting them know about what are some of these barriers that are currently there to policy out of it. I can tell you this, for us, it is going to be a big, we will not let go the community college system of offering baccalaureates that the Cal State system cannot. So this is not the current bills that are in place. It's not that they give us the authority, it's to actually help the Cal State system with their, lack, or not lack, just their inability to have some of these degrees. And then second, as I mentioned before, the policies to put internships into the language for workforce funding, and then finally removing some of the 4-year mandates with county, state, and city jobs that can be done through a 2-year associate's degree.
So some of that is the same as the Cal State UC system.
Totally, yeah. It's the same kind of concept. You're absolutely right. With the PhDs, it's like just trickling down. Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah, Garrett.
Yeah, and I mean, I think building off of that, I think public agencies more broadly, not just state, is looking at your own procurement processes. Where are we maybe being a little onerous right now? It's like there's an outcome, there's sets of skill sets that we need, but maybe it isn't specifically, as just an example for charger maintenance, maybe it isn't exclusively just electricians that we need in that case. And so there's, an opportunity. It doesn't have to be a zero sum here. We need more of everyone in this electrify everything. The other point I was just going to make is that data. We don't have a lot of really great data on these occupations and careers. The federal government hasn't really been looking at green jobs since 2013. And so we've just been kind of filling the holes. And California did have a state bill. It didn't go anywhere. But to study the green jobs comprehensively across California, can we bring that back up, do more of that, be really leaders, not just in creation of jobs, but actually monitoring, tracking them. And I think the final piece here is where's the federal government going to fall short? And there's probably a lot of areas, but I think specifically about populations that are just incredibly vulnerable, particularly that are not eligible for federal workforce dollars, such as our undocumented populations that are just going to be so important to bring along in this economic transformation. So I just wanted to put that out
Yeah.
there too.
Garrett, whose bill was that and when did it die?
Oh my goodness! I will look that.
Okay, let
I
us
forget
know.
the exact number, but it was like about 2 years ago. Yeah, I'll look that back up. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question for you all. Nobody mentioned elementary school curriculums.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk about that? Elliot does.
Yeah, I do, but I'll wait.
What are you waiting for?
Somebody else to start. I've been doing this work K to 16. Young people have notions that are meaningful to them around what's interesting to them. Schools don't pay attention. There's no time to pay attention to that. You get a little bit in kindergarten, but now it's all about literacy and numeracy. That's not what Freibel set up kindergarten for. He'd turn over in his grave if he saw what was going on. And if you look in Finland, and there's some dirty little secrets there that people don't understand about the Finnish education system, they don't start teaching reading and math until you're 7 years old. 7. And they have probably the most advanced, people would argue this, but the best system, and they do a lot of work around internships and following young people. The other thing they do, which is really interesting on the K to 8 side, but it's really K to 12. Because of their background in carving, when they first started in the late 1800s, to this day, every student in every grade takes either wood, metal, clay, or textiles as a course. They get their hands on stuff all the time. And the only equivalent that we have in the United States is, all of you remember when you made a little pot holder, and your mother still has it in the house. They still make stuff that goes from the school into the home as an object and a manifestation of the school into the home. They still do that, and people don't know that. Now, they created companies called Nokia and all these other fancy tech companies. That's because they said 1 minute over there. I know.
Yeah.
I'm used to being a moderator, but
Who said 1 minute?
that
Where are you?
young woman over there. So,
Oh, okay.
so
I'm
these,
gonna need-
these are really important things to consider. We don't allow kids to get our hands on anything, or else there's a litigation. Somebody,
In our last minute, next steps, each of you. Next steps. We have 1 minute. David.
Continuing to work with our industry and academic center. Yeah.
Partnerships, right? Engaging the public, the private, the nonprofits, and really creating that experiential learning opportunity.
Yeah. Agreed. Break down those silos. Found the bill. Let's resurrect AB 1224. Assembly member Brian in Culver City. So, let's do that as well. Let's have good data and break down silos.
Robin.
Take advantage of the zeal that young people have for climate change and preservation, and invest in them, in high-quality experiential programs, and earn and learn, for sure.
Thank you.
amen. All good.
That's it?
Yeah. that was
Okay,
good.
well, thank
I like
you
that.
all. Really appreciate your wisdom.